Ramree Island's mangrove forest is home to an unknown number of saltwater crocodiles, the world's most giant reptilian killer. These prehistoric holdovers can grow to over 20 feet in length and over 2,000 pounds in some cases. And although examples of that size are rare, even a mid-sized crocodile of that species could quickly kill a full-grown adult human. In addition, saltwater crocodiles are far from a misunderstood monster. Humans who venture into crocodile territories have a long history of being attacked by the reptiles, who see them as nothing more than taller, more clumsy prey. The Japanese army had invaded the Burma region in 1942 in the midst of the Second World War. They believed they would be successful in their invasion as they were the ones who trained the Burmese army, and they were in an allegiance. The Burmese would gain the freedom from the British simply by letting the Japanese invade, but as time drew near, so did the thoughts of the Burmese. They decided to turn against the Japanese soldiers. The Burmese asked the United Kingdom for help, forming an alliance with them. The Japanese had to flee to the south of Burma, where the Ramree Island mangrove awaited. They would soon learn that they were stuck between two kinds of enemies, the British and the crocodiles. Were at least 1,000 soldiers trying to cross the mangrove, fleeing from the British. Many were injured and some were on the verge of death, trying too hard to keep it in. No man wanted to leave without seeing their family first. Dying in combat was horrible, but dying surrounded by family was the dream. The men pushed on, unaware of the evil that awaited them. One of the soldiers was the first to figure out something was wrong. He had a wounded warrior on his back. They moved slowly behind everyone else. The soldier turned behind him, thinking he had heard the enemy closing in, but it wasn't that. He couldn't tell what it was, but something sinister was at stake. He continued to press on, trying to catch up with the others as he fell behind further and further. He waddled through the thick swamp, trying hard not to be left behind, but it was proving impossible. His rush to catch up with the team was fueled by the fear that something was coming, and he didn't care what. He just didn't want to be caught in it. He pushed through until he heard it, the loud snapping sound of crocodiles.
Help!
The soldier screamed as the creatures dove out of their hiding place and tore at the soldier on his back, dragging the wounded man into the water to feast on him. The soldier couldn't believe his eyes as he tried to keep moving on. He hoped to warn the others, but a part of him was aware it was too late. The crocodiles surrounded him, taking several bites out of him and eventually pulled him into the waters. The only evidence of his existence? The bloody water. The men fleeing in the front heard the screams of their colleague, but never would have guessed what was coming. They moved through the water quick, the injured falling off backs, and carriers that the soldiers moved with them. They cried for help, but no soldier would turn back for them. They were on their own now. The creatures got to them next, tearing into them as the hungry beasts they are. The creatures were excited. The smell of blood and warfare had brought them here, and they were not disappointed by the feast they found. They tore into the injured left behind. The men yelling for a savior, but none came forward. Their screams filled the entire mangrove like a loud concert. A healthy soldier turned back. He couldn't leave his people behind. It was betrayal that had gotten them here, and it wasn't something he stood for. He began firing at the creatures, shooting as much as he could, but was unaware of the dangers that laid ahead of him. The crocodiles moved around him, circling the clueless man as he tried to do the heroic thing. He thought it was over and he would soon free his people, but he was so wrong. The creatures, with a large snap, grabbed him at his feet and dragged him into the shallow water below. They chewed him alive, his screams joining those of his colleagues. The soldiers kept going, no one turning back to rescue the ones left behind.
Every man for himself and don't look back. The enemy is upon us.
He was right. The enemy was indeed upon them, but they were clueless on to which enemy they had invoked. They were also ignorant of how large their new enemy truly was. The crocodiles kept coming, their numbers increasing as they grabbed the injured men who moved on their own. The ones who believed they were strong enough to make it to their own 2 feet, the crocodiles bit into them, dragging them into the water and filling their homeland with the screams of their prey. The others kept going, running as fast as they could. They were now fully aware of the crocodiles, but their instincts had told them to keep going. Some were sure the British Army was close by.
Help! Help!
A soldier screamed. He had been caught in a log of some sort and couldn't get out. Another soldier turned back to help him, pulling his feet out of the log just in time. The crocodiles jumped out, baring their teeth at the men and launching at them. They caught the soldiers and feasted on them. There was no glimmer of hope for these soldiers who kept running but still could not outrun their enemy, the crocodiles. There was a silence in the Ramree Island mangrove after a while. The British soldiers making their way into the land stayed silent, listening to the desperate cries of the Japanese soldiers they were chasing. The men let out shocked gasps as they were faced with bloody waters and human parts, the only sign that their enemy had passed through this land. They began rounding up the bodies of the soldiers, looking out for any they could capture. Meanwhile, in the distance, the snapping of crocodiles continued. That night of February 19th, 1945 was the most horrible that any member of the ML motor launch cruise has ever experienced. The crocodiles, alerted by the din of the warfare and the smell of blood, gathered among the mangroves, lying with their eyes above the water, watchfully alert for their next meal. With the ebb of the tide, the crocodiles moved in on the dead, wounded, and uninjured men who had become mired in the mud. The scattered rifle shots in the pitch-black swamp, punctured by the screams of the wounded men crushed in the jaws of huge reptiles, and the blurred whirring sound of spinning crocodiles made a cacophony of hell that had rarely been duplicated on Earth. At dawn, the vultures arrived to clean up what the crocodiles had left.